Hello, everybody. I have an announcement. The podcast is moving to Spotify.
Oh boy, what has Joe Rogan got himself into now? Joe Rogan was recently seen outside a California ATM dancing as the cash was dispensed, and then frantically trying to stop the money shooting out while picking it up. Later, Rogan posted an Instagram video of himself making a sandwich as he got some $100 bill lettuce ready. And after eating, he went out to his pool in Bells Canyon, California, and executed a perfect 10-point cannonball into his newly acquired $100 million plus from Spotify. I'm just joking with you guys. So yes, the rumors are true. Spotify has came up with a licensing agreement and has signed the podcast master himself, Joe Rogan, for a reported $100+ million. This is huge industry-changing news. Up until this point, Joe Rogan's podcast was never available on Spotify. So let's explain the big picture here. So some of you guys may be thinking, isn't Spotify that music app? And you wouldn't be wrong. But as of 2019, Spotify has shown their interest in the podcast world by signing some of the top content creators. They started by buying 2 podcast networks in Gimlet Media for $195 million, Parcast for $55 million, and a podcast creation company known as Anchor for $154 million, spending just about $400 million on these 3 companies combined. Then during this year, they also bought Bill Simmons' podcast and media company, The Ringer, for $196 million, which will bring highly valuable and loyal sports fans over to Spotify. And now, as of May 18th, the signing of Joe Rogan's podcast and his $100+ million deal has put the podcast ambitions of Spotify and their abilities at the top of the list. Spotify said when they were buying Joe Rogan's podcast that he was the most searched podcast. Spotify is showing that they are not shy to spend money to try and put themselves at the head of the pack, with spending over $700+ million to acquire all of these top content creators. Just to put in perspective what the signing of Joe Rogan alone means to Spotify, as of May 19th, Spotify's stock was worth $161.43. In just 24 hours, on May 20th, Spotify's stock was worth $189.80, making that an 8% increase just by the announcement. As of May 26th, the stock price closed at $191. And to put things in a bigger picture, on May 18th, if you wanted to purchase Spotify, it would have cost you a whopping $30.53 billion. And in just 48 hours, Spotify's worth increased to $35.29 billion, an increase of $5 billion in just 48 hours. So, to sum it all up, Spotify comes to a licensing agreement with Joe Rogan. They then pay Joe over $100 million for his Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Spotify's net worth then increases $5 billion in just 48 hours of the announcement that Joe Rogan's podcast will be on Spotify. Overall, I'd say that's a pretty good business move. Spend $100 million, make $5 billion in 48 hours. I don't think anybody would decide not to do that. With these moves, Spotify is putting YouTube and iTunes on notice that they are very interested in taking over the podcast world, or at least being a top competitor by acquiring some of these top content creators. Spotify has been building their large show library, and after the signing of Joe Rogan, they say that they now have over 100 million podcasts available on their app. Now, even though Spotify has made these recent moves, we can be sure that Apple and YouTube aren't going to want to go quietly. However, Apple may have more of a tough time doing this. Apple currently allows people to upload their podcasts regularly and roam freely without Apple trying to own their show. They also don't have any signed creators, and it doesn't produce any of its own shows. and it doesn't sell ads, which goes against Apple's private policy. Apple has more of a user-friendly policy without ads, and because of this, Spotify can become the leaders of the space, which is a huge deal because Joe Rogan averages 190 million in downloads a month. So if you were to look at the amount of money he makes on the low end, he could be pulling in 3 million a month in ad revenue. And as the godfather of podcasts, it's no wonder that he pulls in these types of numbers. Joe's show has a wide range of guests and topics and has been going on for a decade now and is still growing in size. He currently has 8.52 million subscribers and reaches audiences all over the world. I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, what are the terms of this agreement besides the financial aspect? Well, Joe Rogan will maintain all control on the creative side. This partnership is strictly a licensing deal only, so Spotify will have no control or input on what Joe does on his show. For the remainder of the year, the podcast will be shown on YouTube, and starting September 1st, 2020, they will begin showing on Spotify's platform also. And then at the start of the new year, the Joe Rogan Experience will only be accessible on Spotify's app. However, there will still be some content of the show's clips on YouTube, but for the entire podcast, you will have to go on Spotify, so users will have to download the Spotify app if they don't currently have it. After all these moves from Spotify, it looks like the podcast landscape is going to be changing drastically from now on, and it looks like it's going to be Spotify versus everybody else. Thanks again, guys, for watching Buzzcast. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell next to it so you get notifications when new videos are released, so we can help our channel grow and I can continue to give you guys some awesome videos. Thanks again, guys. See you soon.
September 1st. Starting on September 1st, the entire JRE library will be available on Spotify as well as all the other platforms. Then somewhere... Hello, everybody. I have an announcement. The podcast is moving to Spotify. I signed a multi-year licensing agreement with Spotify that will start on September 1st. Starting on September 1st, the entire JRE library will be available on Spotify as well as all the other platforms. Then somewhere around the end of the year, it will become exclusive to Spotify, including the video version of the podcast. It will be the exact same show. I am not going to be an employee of Spotify. We're going to be working with the same crew doing the exact same show. The only difference will be it will now be available on the largest audio platform in the world. Nothing else will change. It will be free. It will be free to you. You just have to go to Spotify to get it. We're very excited to begin this new chapter of the JRE, and I hope you're there when we cross over. Thanks.